Welcome to the Josh Hall Web Design Show. Helping you build better websites and create a web design business that gives you freedom and a lifestyle you love.
Hey everybody, welcome into the podcast. This is episode 94. So I have to say, because every interview I've done on the podcast, I've learned so much from. I feel like I've really had some amazing people on the podcast. I always come away with some really great takeaways and a lot of things learned. But I have to say, this episode is the one where I maybe have learned the most to date. The reason being is because in this episode, we're going to talk all about going niche, or as my UK friends might say, going niche. And what that means, if you're just new to web design and business, if you're not sure what that means you focus your services on one target market or one type of client, one industry. And the reason this was so eye-opening for me, this conversation, is because that's not the route that I took. In my web design business, as many of you know, I worked with all sorts of clients, all different industries, from chiropractors to barbershops, auto mechanics, all sorts of industries. But my guest in this interview and on this podcast did not do that. He had a web design business, where he did marketing and web design for a bunch of different industries, but then he realized he actually did really well in a certain market, and that was with online coaches. And he decided to go niche and just work with coaches, and he has created an incredible business out of going niche. My guest in this episode, Jason Gracia, is actually a repeat guest. I had him on episode 36. We talked about conversions in that episode, so make sure you revisit that one if you haven't already. But Jason is awesome. He is the owner of SavvyHippo.com, which was a marketing company that, again, worked with all sorts of industries, but he decided to go niche. And in this episode, he is fully transparent with everything that he learned with how to do this successfully. And for those of you who are dabbling in this and interested in potentially going niche, this episode is going to be right down your alley because Jason is just an amazing business mind. He's a great marketer. I really enjoy talking with him every time I get him on the podcast. And even if you're like me, if you're somebody who would never have thought about going niche and you just want to work with a bunch of different clients and industries, I would encourage you to have an open mind and an open ear to this one to see if this is something you'd be interested in. Because I got to be honest, I always avoided niching down services, because there's pros and cons with everything, but I just never wanted to limit myself. But I have to say, after hearing Jason out in this episode, going back 10 years ago when I started, I may have considered going niche, because you'll find you can actually expedite your journey and, quite frankly, make a lot more and save a lot more time by focusing on one demographic and one target market. So either way, enjoy this one because I'm super pumped for you. Now, no matter what industry you're working with, there's one thing that has to be consistent and has to be true for you, and that is that you can create websites that convert. Because it's one thing to create a design that's pretty and looks nice, and that's important, but it's not nearly as important as making sure your website turns visitors into leads or into customers. And if you need some help in that area, I want to invite you right now to join my website design course. My design course is completely built around conversion-based design principles that will help you create websites that, again, turn website visitors into actual leads or customers. And this is the key, guys, for your clients, because clients aren't going to care how nice something looks if it doesn't convert. But if you're actually helping getting more conversions for your clients and helping their business grow, you're going to look like a rock star and you're going to make clients for life. And that's what this course is all about. So if that sounds interesting, check out my website design course. You can go to the show notes for this page. You can actually also now go to joshhall.co/design, and that'll zip you over to the course. I would love to help you with creating conversion-based designs for all your websites. All right, guys, again, without further ado, have an open mind on this one, particularly if you're like me and going niche was not something you would have thought about, or maybe you've been just wary of. I would really encourage you to hear Jason out and enjoy it, because I learned so much from this episode, and you will too. Let's dive in. Jason, welcome back onto the podcast, man. Great to have you on again.
Thank you so much. This is one of my favorites.
Well, it's funny because I had you on pretty early on, and I think it was after our interview when we were talking. I think you'd mentioned, how much you've learned about going niche in your industry, because you've done web design, you've done a lot of different things, but you decided to really hone in on your business with Savvy Hippo, which I'm going to ask you here, what you do exactly to refresh everybody. But I thought that was a great point, and I really wanted to dive into this idea of going niche, because it's something that I've found a lot of my students are asking me about. More and more people are interested in going niche, so they stay in one industry. I have my own thoughts about it, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. I actually, because I didn't go that route, I have a lot of objections to it, but I wanted to hear from somebody who's doing it well and is crushing it, and you're enjoying life too. You have a family and everything. So real excited to dive into this. But yeah, before we do you want to let everybody know where you're based out of and what you do with your business, Savvy Hippo?
Yeah, so based in Madison, Wisconsin. So 10 months of Arctic cold, and then a few weeks of beautiful weather that keeps us here. But yeah, so at Savvy Hippo, we create coaching websites, so specialized websites specifically for coaches who want to book clients. So that is our bread and butter. And I started, as we'll talk about, as a generalist, but then really everything changed for me in the business once I zeroed in on just helping those people achieve that one objective. And so that's what we do. We do one thing and we do it really well.
That's what I'm excited to hear about, because that's a proposition that sounds very appealing, but it's tricky. And I'm sure there was a whole process to do that. It's also, I think, for people new in business, it's like, man, do I want to limit myself? I'm sure there's an aspect there where it's appealing, but it's probably daunting to think like, I'm going to limit my customers. So I'd love to start off, Jason, with finding out what you were doing and where you were in business when you decided to go niche. Were you designing websites for everybody? What did that look like for you? And what planted the seed to think like, I might want to zone in on this one industry?
Yeah. So as I think we might have talked about this before, but I was going through cancer treatment when like everything my whole world got pushed the reset button. Before that, for 15 years, I had built motivation123.com, which is a personal development brand online. I wrote books, did courses, and did consulting. And after that, it started and it was terrible. It was one of those, I had 2 subscribers, me, and then another email address I started. My mom and dad weren't even subscribers. But I eventually figured it out and I grew this big business. And then I started to consult, teaching other people who wanted to do it. Now we see it everywhere, how to sell your expertise. This was about 10 years ago, so a little earlier. And what I realized was a lot of the people coming to me were coaches and consultants. And so that kind of planted the seed that there's this market of coaches and consultants who they've got the heart, they've got the spirit, they want to serve, which I love, that really appealed to me, but they don't yet have the business chops. So that planted the seed of, okay, there's this market that I really enjoy working with. And what I noticed as I consulted about strategy was that the strategy didn't matter if their website was broken. Mm-hmm. So I would teach strategy, but then once I realized, but your website, there's so many things wrong. It doesn't matter how many people you bring to this house. If the house is broken, what can we do? Like, I just banged my head against the wall because I wasn't a website designer yet. And so that's where I saw the problem. So I saw the market of coaches, and now there's this problem. It's kind of, we're trying to get to the other side, but this first boulder is just standing in the way, and it's your website needs fixing. So then I started to help out, and I'd be like, okay, I can put a few pages together for you, but this isn't really what I do. And they loved that. And then I would do more and more. And eventually I realized, okay, I love working, building websites for myself. And now there's these coaches who really need it. So maybe I'll do website design. And so that's kind of where it ended. That was like chapter 1. I really like building these websites. So I start building websites for everybody, friends, family, that whole shebang. And then I thought, okay, this is okay, but I'm realizing there are 10,000 people who do what I do. There's also Squarespace, Wix, Weebly, templates, page builders. Everyone does what I do. And so if I want it to be a business, I'm in a red ocean. I'm in a pool that is packed with other people who do what I do and cheaper. Because if you're a commodity, it's price. What I found, of course, I know that it works, other ways work, but what I found is when you're a commodity, people are going to compare price. And so in the beginning, I had a lot of how much you charge. That's really all I want to know. Mm-hmm. And then cancer, right? So that, and cancer free today. So knock on wood, all beautiful, good. I like to share it. just to let people know my story, but not as a sad. I was one of the lucky ones, doing great. But during the cancer experience, everything stopped. I couldn't run my business. I couldn't really do anything, but I could think too much, really.
Interesting.
And what I realized was I loved design, I love marketing, I loved coaches, but I wasn't serving them. I was serving everybody. But what if I just dialed in? What if I just picked that one group? And then the worry set in. Whoa. I have this large net. I'm going to like narrow it down to this tiny little handful. And I get it. Every time I talk about niching with coaches, that's their first worry. Like, I can't do that. There's so many people that I can serve. I'm all this money, all this opportunity. But what you realize is if you do it right, which we'll talk about, you can prove out a market to know that there's enough in that smaller net to have a really healthy business, especially because of pricing. Pricing changes once you're a specialist. So you don't need as many. So that's kind of the thought process I went through, that I love design. I love teaching. I started design in general, realized there was just so much competition. I couldn't stand out, and then put the pieces together like coaches. As worried as I was, let's go for it. And so that's when I decided to launch Savvy Hippo, coaches only, and business exploded because of that. So long story short, started with everyone, realized the competition just made it too hard for me to stand out, and then dove into coaches in particular.
And what year was that? What year did you officially go full on niche?
2016.
2016. Okay. So at this point, we're talking early 2021 right now. So almost 5 years.
It's crazy.
Almost 5 years at it. That's awesome, man.
Right.
And that's what's so cool. Like, I agree. I definitely agree with what you said. It's tricky when you're in a position where you can be viewed as a commodity, like a web designer. I will say, however, I did it and got by just fine. And the beauty about web design is there's such a need that you don't need to service everyone who needs a website. You just need to service the kind of people and clients you want to service. So that can also be in different industries. I know we're talking about going niche, but for me, like a couple dozen clients was plenty enough and more enough for me to take it to six figures and beyond. But the trick is I didn't just build websites off a template. I added a lot of other value in and around it as I learned more about SEO and conversion-based stuff. And that's what I'm loving teaching my students right now is you can't just come across as a simple web designer. You need to have a passion for marketing and content and conversion, and at least a well-rounded understanding of all the things that work in and around a website. And even if you don't want to focus on certain areas, at least have partners and people you can refer that out to, because that's the value proposition for you opposed to the guy or gal down the road. But what's really cool about the idea of going niche for you, or niche as my UK friends would say, is you're honing in on that, which I want to dive into, how to hone on that. And I just want to back you up in saying that while I took a different path as a web designer, I did take this road, the niche path, with what I do now as a course creator, because as you know, my audience is basically primarily Divi web designers who run their own businesses.
Right.
Now,
So you really niched.
Yeah. Like it's like a niche within a niche within a niche. So how many people are learning web design? Hundreds of thousands, maybe millions right now. I can't service all those people at scale when there's Udemy and some of these other platforms out there. So the niche within that is WordPress. So WordPress is, I think at this time, almost 40% of the internet, if I recall right. Don't hold me to that.
Last time I looked, it was around at least 30.
35?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe, you know what? It's 34. I'm sorry. The last thing I heard was 34%. So that's a niche within web design. And then I'm in the niche under WordPress. It's like, well, what theme builder do I cater to? And it's Divi, because that's what I use. And that's that's the community I'm in. So that's kind of the practical example of how I took a very narrow road. And for me, I've been able to build an incredible life and business around, I'm almost at 800 students at the time of recording this with you.
That's fantastic.
I launched my membership, which, that's super cool, but that's not that many people if you look at the entire scope of people learning web design. But that's more than enough for me right now, which is really cool and really freeing for anyone in web design, and then particularly for going niche, because like we're going to talk about, it's about adding that value. So when you decided to make that transition, what did you do differently with your service offering? And did you research the market more? Did you really get sharp on your offering and stuff? Or what did that look like? Because I'm sure there was a lot of work involved with that transition.
Yep. And absolutely. Because if you're going to do it, you got to do it right. Which because you're a great entrepreneur. So I'll answer that by answering. So I just want to mention a few points because you mentioned what I love that you said is that people still, once they got to you, it wasn't commodity. Because once they got a chance to speak with you, they realized, okay, this is a value play. Josh is bringing so much more than a Squarespace or a Wix or a Weebly. So what I'd say to that, what thought popped into my head is the good thing about niching is that step is taken care of for you before you have to have the conversation. So that's one, it was a faster play for me because people were seeking me out as the specialist, where I didn't first have to meet with them and say, I get that there's a lot of other people, but here's why I'm different. As they came through the door, they knew you're different. And so almost everyone on my application, when they said, why did you choose Savvy Hippo? It was probably 95% because you only work with coaches.
Okay.
So I totally agree with you that you still get people in the door and they're still going to pay a premium price. I just found with niching, one step is removed. I don't have to tell the story to convince them. They already know it as they come. So I just wanted to mention that because that's a great point that you made.
Well, and I was just thinking like the catch-22 for a web designer with that, particularly if you stay in your area, is if you just work with dentist office, for example. If you're just working with dentist office in your area, it can be a little tricky because then you've got your clients competing with each other. Where they might be trying. You might be like, "Well, I saw that you got this dentist up on the first page of Google. I want that too." And then all of a sudden, you've got competitor clients. But with coaches and consultants, it's a very wide. Like I doubt they're conflicting with each other. You might have some in similar industries, but it's a little different than like
that is a good point though.
SEO. So I guess that's one thing to consider if you do niche as a web designer. You might want to broaden your service offerings, and you might want to cater to people in different regions other than just locally. But but that's beside the point. So I didn't mean to cut you off. But
no. Okay, so as far as what I did, so to get there, here's the mental steps I went through of like, should I choose a niche or not? So if people are worried, which I get, mentally, here's what I went through. And number one for me was eliminating alternatives. So when I did sales calls early on, they were shoppers because they were comparing me to everyone else because I looked like everyone else. One of the most important pieces of niching is you're eliminating comparison. So the key, if you can, is to become a market of one, because then that eliminates that conversation. There's only one person who does what you do, then you're the obvious choice. It's not always easy to become a market of one to eliminate all, but by niching, you can close the door on so many other people because you don't do what they do anymore. So when it comes to Savvy Hippo, we focus on integrating a calendar so that people can book free sessions. We teach them how to follow up on that free session call. We teach them how to use email marketing to book calls and enroll clients. We build their pages around getting people to book that strategy call instead of we build a website. And so once we could build a brand around this specialized service, no one else did that. So my number one reason was I eliminated alternatives. I eliminated the comparison to how I'm like everybody else. Now, hardly anyone does what we do. And so that made my job so much easier. So that's probably the number one reason for niching for me, is that the more I did exactly specifically what I did, the less other people did it. And there's my unique selling proposition.
Now, when you started, when you went niche with it, were you primarily just doing web design for coaches? And then did you start to add more of the marketing aspects and funnels and email? Or because I'm sure it was tricky to figure out, because there's danger in becoming an all-in-one type of service, but there's power in it, I guess, if you're niche, because you could probably create a lot of the same templates and systems to use.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because you can become a generalist once you're inside the niche. Which, that's a good way to put it.
Okay, I like that. That's good.
Right. And so that's definitely what I did. So I'll just run through a few more like in my head, because I know this is such a struggle for people. So, and then I can get to how I did that. But first it was eliminating alternatives. Then I realized that as a generalist, when it comes to marketing, it's really hard to know. It's almost, there's too many places to go. So a lot of my coaches, when they first start, they don't know what to do, because if the world is their market, where do you go? What do you do? That's what I was struggling with design. Okay, I'm a website designer. what do I do next? When I chose coaches, it instantly became clear. Oh, I know. I go to coaching blogs, coaching podcasts, coaching groups on Facebook, coaching groups on LinkedIn. I reach out to coaches, mentors to coaches. All of that work was done for me. So once I chose a niche, I knew exactly where to go. As opposed to when I first started, it was almost an embarrassment of riches in that the world was my market, which is too much. Now I don't know what to do. So for a coach or for a website designer, if you pick that specific industry, now you know where to go, because that industry, if you do it right, has a community, has publications, has social media groups. They have an entire universe already built, and now you just go there. And so that was huge for me, because I knew what to do.
I was going to ask next about how you found your ideal clients, but I wanted to preface this by saying there's kind of different versions of niches as well, niches, because you think, like the example I use is very common. I just want to build medical facility websites or just sites for auto mechanics or something like that. But you could actually position yourself as a web designer to say, we build websites for small businesses versus nonprofits or startups, or there's actually ways to kind of like semi niche, which is kind of interesting. I always did that as well. I typically always said we build awesome websites for small to medium-sized businesses. Those were our
right.
And it weeded out those people who were just starting out, who had a budget of $150. Like, it just wasn't a good fit. So that's always an option. But that goes down to figuring out who your ideal client is. And it's important for everybody, even if it's not an exact industry or business, at least the type of person or budget they're going to work with, or type of income that a business has. So for you, coaches and consultants, to me, that I imagine that would be a little tricky, because a lot of people just branch into coaching and they have like zero budget. So how did you have any filtration systems in place that did you work with everyone as a coach, or did they have to meet a requirement? Did they have to be established, or did they at least have to be bringing in a certain amount of income? What did that look like when you decided, okay, you picked this industry, but then the question is, how do you pick your best clients in that industry?
Right. So I teach a 4-step process. This is a great question, because some people think, oh, niche, I'm just going to choose my Uncle Bob, and that's it. And that's my business, and I'm going to thrive because I chose my niche. There's a lot more that goes into it. It's got to be the right niche and has to be able to afford you. People who want to niche, I've had coaches who want to serve people who don't have money. I get that. The heart part of it, I get it. You want to. But if they don't have money, that means they can't afford a coach. And so you're setting yourself up to fail. Now, if you want to do pro bono work, that's great for them.
Sure.
But you're right. You've got to pick a market that can afford you. So what I did was I teach 4 steps. What you do first is take inventory. And you take inventory on 2 things. So I teach target market. Those are the people you serve. Niche, that's how you serve them. You can narrow for both or one or the other. Like you mentioned, you could narrow with target market, small business, or you could narrow with niche. We help you get clients. So there's 2 different ways, who you serve and how you serve. I did both. Coaches get clients, because there's a lot I could do for coaches. You can serve coaches in so many ways. Getting clients is just one pillar. And so what you want to do first is take inventory of every market you can serve and every outcome you can deliver. So as a designer, you have to think of who are all the people, and you just make a list. I made a list of everyone that I could serve with my skills and all the different ways I could serve them. So I could focus on list building. I could focus on SEO. I could focus on course creation. I could focus on so many things within coaches, but I chose getting calls booked. Because for me,
did you also write what you don't do or what you're not going to touch?
Yeah. Because there's certain things like e-com. I'm not going to set up e-commerce platforms for coaches. And that was the big one. There's a lot. Because you're right. You have to also know what you don't want to do.
Yeah, I was just thinking, as a web designer, almost like a very high percentage of my clients would get a website done. And then the next thing I know, they're like, hey, we really enjoyed working with you and your team, Josh. Can you run our social media ads? And I'm like, I don't do that. And then they're like, what about our Google ads? I'm like, I don't do that. But you do SEO. And I'm like, well, it's different. We do a different type of SEO. So I had to learn to get very clear about exactly what we did and referral partners. So I imagine you had to take that same approach, right? To be very clear.
Right.
because you
And
talk
this-
about your ideal clients and they have to know what you do. Exactly.
And this is just for the designer on their own. So you're just in a notebook writing these things down. So you're going to write down everything you could do. That's step one. Step two is you have to narrow by the market. So is there a market for, and you just go down the list. And the way you prove out a market is, are there communities built around this? So I'll use coaching as an example. Are there communities of coaches? Definitely. I went to Facebook, I Googled, I went to LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. I knew that coaching was a market, a community I could serve. Are there people advertising consistently to this market? So are people paying money to get in front of the market consistently? If there are, you know that market's buying. So someone wouldn't run ads over and over and over if no one was buying this stuff, and then they don't have money. So that's what I did. I watched the advertisers. So I went to Facebook, I found people who were advertising to coaches, and then I would go to all of their old ads and see how long they ran these ads. If they consistently marketed to this audience, now I know that there is a paying audience.
Interesting.
So I did all of these little steps. Are there communities? Are there publications, magazines, forums, blogs dedicated to these people? Are people selling courses to serve this market? So are there courses for coaches? I found a ton. I made a list of all of them. So now I know this market is buying. So step two, is there a paying market? That was number one, because people talk about passion. I think that's ridiculous. If people are not going to pay you money, it does not matter how passionate you are about this. You've got to pick a market that has money, and not just money, but a need. They are looking for a solution. So that was step two, and that weeded out a lot. I'm cutting as much as I can on this list.
It just makes me think of when I first got started in design. I focused on basically bands, like our bands that we would travel with when I was a drummer in a rock band, and I was just designing t-shirts. I was like, why I'm not making enough, I'm not making much money. Why? It's like, well, they're like your ideal clients are like barely able to pay $50 for a design. So of course, I really thought about that as I matured in business. And it's funny because as you were talking about narrowing your market and understanding the market, I did this all unintentionally with Divi and WordPress because I was a customer, because I was a web designer, and because I ran my business. And I didn't really think about community being a big aspect of niching down, but you're totally right. And it makes sense because it's the best place to start with a niche, is to be in the community and to be really helpful. And that's exactly how I built my authority, as you know, in Divi. I think we originally got connected. I remember, Jason. I think you found me on YouTube for learning Divi sites, right? Or something like that.
Yeah, so, it was Divi.
Yeah, and that's how I really capitalized and came up in this niche, was the community aspect. I didn't run ads. I still don't run ads or anything like that. It's completely organic and community driven, which is a great approach. So that's really interesting to hear that that's how you really focused on that. And let's be honest, consultants, entrepreneur types that are coaches, they're probably very prone to be in a community, and they probably need some social interaction. So you probably found that was a good place to get leads, right? Did you start the referral train pretty quick when you started reaching out? What did that look like when you started getting more clients?
Yeah, as soon as I picked coaches, my first strategy always, whenever I enter a market, is I go to all the leaders of the market and establish a relationship. So what I did was I went to everyone who mentored coaches, and then I said, I'm just starting this business. I'm not in competition with you. I build websites. I don't want to sell courses to train them on how to grow their business. But I see you're a leader, and I would love to profile you on my blog. Now, back then, it was a little easier because the blog had more cachet than it does now. I think, like we talked about, podcasting is really where you do that.
Oh, you're really going to blow Savvy Hippo up once you start your podcast.
But then back then it worked. And so what I did was I went to all the leaders, and I said, I want to profile you. I want to pick your brains and then feature it on my website. And so I established a relationship with them. I didn't mention, can I get in front of your audience? Can we do a relationship, JV, partnership, affiliate? All I said was, I love what you're doing. I want to share you with my growing audience. So I had a relationship with a dozen people who had thousands, tens of thousands of people under them who are all coaches.
That's beautiful.
And then, just like you're the master at building relationship, authentic, sincere relationship. That's all I did. I just kept in touch, offered value. And then when someone asked about a website, they, of course, recommended me because I'm the coaching website guy. And that's another thing with niching. You become the guy or the girl. And it's very easy then, because I think what we love to think is when people talk about us, they tell our whole story and they get into all the details and the nitty gritty about how amazing we are. And we do all this. Really, it's usually a sentence or two. Oh yeah, I know a guy who does this. For me, it was easy for people to recommend me. You want a coaching website? Oh, Savvy Hippo, they're the coaching website people. And that was it. Well, as opposed to, they design websites and then anyone does, anyone designs a website. So that's what I did. I opened up that market by going to leaders, first shining attention on them, making them the star. And then eventually they put me in front of their audiences, which definitely number one marketer for me is referrals through partnerships.
And that's the way to do it, man. It's a whole different approach to sales. I'm actually thinking about doing maybe a podcast or a training in my club about this, because when you think about sales, you think about like, oh, I'm so nervous to cold call and go into a place and ask if they need a website design. And it's just not the way to go. It's sometimes it can be a little longer. It can take some time to go that route, but when you start that referral train of good quality leads, it will often, it's just so much better. It's exactly how I ran my business. It will often bring so much better clients quicker when you establish those relationships and when you're not coming across salesy. And a method that I tell all of my students to do, and I'll just throw this out to everybody, that's very non-salesy, but will get you a ton of business, I promise you, I guarantee it, is if you do like an interview series. Your chamber of commerce or something, or networking groups, if you interview like 10 or 12 businesses and just talk with the owner about their business, feature their business, and do like an interview series for 3 months or a couple months, you will attract so much attention because, and then you're just, you don't have to promote yourself too much, but just say like, this is presented by me and my web design business. We help businesses with their website. And then here's our featured interview, and they talk about their business or however you want to go about it. And then they share it to their audience. They share it to their customers or to their professional networks. And then if you do that 10 or 12 times over, exactly what you did, Jason, is exactly what you're going to find there. You're automatically going to be in front of hundreds of people, and you're not going to look like a slimy sales person. Right. You're going to look like a helper. And that is the best way to sell in 2021.
I'll tell. It's funny. So I have an intake form, of course, if someone wants to book a strategy call with me, to like the initial call. And I'll tell you, when I see Google as where they found me, as much as people push SEO and like that's their whole focus, I don't close that as many from Google, because those are usually the shoppers. When I see a name referred by, it's so much easier. And literally yesterday, I got on the call. Within 3 minutes, she said, I'm in. My friend already told me about you. You can talk. She said, you can talk. That's great, but I already want to pay. So just send me the invoice. Like that's the dream. And that happens over and over and over. I go in front of a group, I present, and then afterwards I get tens of thousands of dollars in business. And there is no selling because I got the authority and the relationship from the leader of the group. And so it's like a backdoor into growing your business. So I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. And it just takes the pressure off of sales. And, there's still, like we talked about, there's a lot of work that goes into that, and it may take some time, but man, it's just, it doesn't end the feast and famine so much depending on the industry, but what it does is I feel like it makes your referrals more consistent when you have really good clients and you're intentional about asking them.
Right.
I don't know if you have any processes for that, to ask about referrals in that niche. So maybe we can talk about that next, but that just breeds so much more good traffic, like you said, instead of those tire kickers and shoppers. Cause I found the same thing, man. People who found me on Google, same thing. It was a much less higher conversion rate because I had to sell myself a little more. I had to explain more. Whereas if somebody came from a referral, I'm basically dittoing what you said. They would be like, hey, I love their website. We want to get going. What's the next steps kind of thing? And it's just, it's the way to go. So how did you,
so different.
How did you capitalize on the referrals? I guess that's the question, because did you intentionally talk to clients about asking them if they knew other coaches, or how did that work? What are some tips that clients can take away?
A whole program on that. So I'll walk you through that. And what I just want to tie a bow on the how to choose. So there were just two quick ones. So there was, first, we start with an inventory of everything you could do. Then the market. Is there a market? The next that I usually teach is ability. What market can you serve better than most? So where is your sweet spot? And then passion is last. Which one do you enjoy? So what you do is you just cross them out. So start with everything you can do. Cross out the ones that don't have a strong market that you know is paying. Then you cross out the ones where you're not an A player. And then you cross out the ones that you don't want to serve. And for me, at the end, it was coaches and consultants. That's the ones who were left.
Do you want to know
I could serve them.
Want to know mine that I didn't want to serve?
Yeah, I do.
Lawyers. God bless lawyers. We need them. We need them. They're important. But man, they were a pain in the ass web design clients.
Like you said before, you mentioned before, like you have to know who you don't want to work with and who you don't want, because it is a nightmare. Yeah. I say no to so many things and it's made my life so much easier. I know in the beginning it's harder.
Too, yeah.
Yep. Right. Like I heard all these lessons when I was younger and I was like the young punk, like, whatever. And then you live and you're like, oh, the old guys were right, because I don't like
everybody.
Serving.
Yeah.
Right?
Mid-20s, you start realizing your parents are right. And then 30s, you're like, oh my gosh, everyone who was older was right.
Everyone's right. Yep. Okay. So as far as referrals, so that's a two-pronged. So once I had my niche, I went to the leaders. And then what I started with and what I still do is I put together a great presentation, 6 steps to a 6-figure coaching website. And then I go in front of their audience, either through a webinar or a Facebook live stream, and I present that program. The great thing about web design is when you pick these other markets, typically the leaders don't do web design at all. It's an empty spot. It's a gap.
Yeah.
So I know Brian Harris from Video Fruit Growth Tools now, that's what he talks about when partnerships find the gap. And so with me, people who serve coaches, it's usually how to sell high ticket services. They don't talk about web design at all. They say you need these things, but that's where they leave it. And so I fill that gap. They plug me in. I come before the audience. I present. They let me do a little pitch at the end. I give them a discount. And then I give that partner a commission. So I'll go in front of them, present, pitch, and then anyone who signs on, the partner gets a commission. The partner loves it even without the commission because I'm plugging in that gap. So they look good. They're bringing in a website expert to finally talk about this confusing world of websites, and they make money. So that's the partner track. As far as my clients, every client, and everyone listening, I hope you already do this. I'm sure you do, but every client who exits our service gets a survey. And then after they submit their survey, what they liked, what they didn't like, testimonial, I then present our referral program. So everyone who comes through our service sees our referral program. Okay. And we offer a commission on every single person they refer. So some clients have paid almost their entire price of their website just by referring us. So it's baked into the system. Everyone sees it. As soon as they click submit on their survey, they're forwarded to our referral program page where we go through the details. Here's the message you can send to people. So here's the email, just copy and paste it. Or you can send an introduction email between us, or you can post on social, and here's what you should post. And then all they have to do is use your name, and then you'll get a commission. And so that's how it just builds on itself. It snowballs.
And it's interesting with web design, you can really mirror what you're talking about, Jason, with those areas, like I mentioned earlier, that you might not want to do in your business. If you don't want to touch SEO, then you can have an SEO partner. And just like you said, the beauty about that is if you partner with somebody who does SEO, you can really focus on the web design aspect. Mm-hmm. And then they're your partner. You'll refer tons of business, and they'll inevitably getting a ton of people who want SEO, but their website's terrible. They'll refer you business. Yep. And it can be a really give and get. And I do that a lot. Yeah. Yeah. And I had kind of a mix between, I never had an official referral program with my business in transit. But what I did have was some strategic partners, and we would feed off each other. And we did some commission-based stuff. And then I got to a point with a lot of them where we just kind of I just gave them business and they gave me business, and it was just a mutual. So you can definitely go about it in a number of different ways. But I like that it was a little bit more organized on your end and strategic with, testimonial, survey, referral programs, resources. You tell people what to do, how to do it. And I imagine that's mutually beneficial for both parties.
And exactly what you're saying, all these check, because I couldn't agree more. Because on sales calls, when they get to something that we don't do, all they're looking for is someone who does it.
Yes.
That's all they want. I used to think, okay, we don't do e-commerce, and so we're going to lose anyone who wants e-commerce done. And I was really worried, but I had to be upfront. I said, okay, we don't set up a store for you. And I worried like, okay, I'm going to lose them. And they said, oh, do you know someone who does? And I was like, oh yeah, you can talk to these guys. And they're like, oh, great, let's keep going. That's when I realized they just want to know there's an answer somewhere. It doesn't have to be you for them to book business with you. And so there's a lot that we don't do. And I let them know we are experts in this one thing. That's why you want us. And if you want these other things, we have partners lined up. They're like, oh, great, let's go. So,
and it makes you look awesome. It makes you look like a total rock star. And it's funny because I'm seeing all of my students being very proactive about this now, which I just love it because they understand now the power of building a network around them to where they don't have to do everything, but know people and make relationships with people who do. And more importantly, just start giving them business. Start referring people and be like, hey, I don't know you too well right now, but I know your stuff and I really like what you're up to. I have a need for an SEO partner. I wonder if you would be interested in taking a lot of leads I get because I don't do that.
Everyone says yes.
Of course they would. Yeah.
Right?
So if you invest in doing that, like you mentioned earlier, I really enjoy the relationship building aspect of entrepreneurship. It takes time. And just like anything good in life, it takes some time to get going with it. But once you develop a few strategic partners, or better yet, if you're in a community where those people are built in, like that's one reason I launched my web design club is because I wanted just that. I wanted people to have an automatic network of SEO people, content people, design people, dev people. Like that's exactly what that is. And there's premium and free versions of that too. Like you can go to free Facebook groups in your niche that do a lot of that. It's a great place to start the network. Or there's more premium like forums and groups and memberships and clubs where you're a little more, you'll get a better result for your clients to have those type of people. But either way, having that network, I couldn't agree more, man. That is huge. And it's such a powerful spot to be in. I wanted to ask you.
I'll quickly mention, because as you said that, I realized if choosing a niche also opens up that door, because once I picked coaching websites, everyone else was not my competition anymore. And so I would reach out to designers and say, if someone comes to me, but I don't do what they want because we only do this, I'll send them to you. And vice versa. If you have anyone who's looking for a coaching website, you could send them to me. So your competition then becomes your partners when you choose a niche, because you're out of their field now. You're not in their pool, which means you have a lot more partnerships that you can go for, because now you're not direct competition. They'll send you people, you send them. Right. So niching opens up those doors even more. It not only eliminates alternatives, it turns those alternatives into partnerships.
Yeah, that's great, because you can even niche with people who are very similar. Like for me, as a web designer, I had SEO partners, videographer partners, photographers, social media, marketing, and ads. Those were my main type of referral partners. But then I also had other web designers who could take on lower level projects that I turned down. So you can actually find like versions of yourself for clients that might not be a good fit, or, there's a lot of versions like that too, which is really cool. Or
even if I reached out to people who, there's not many of us, but the people who design coaching websites. And I said, I love what you're doing. If you ever get someone either who doesn't fit or you're overflow, like you're booked. I've gotten tens of thousands of dollars from people who say, I just don't have time in my schedule. Go there. So when you niche, you can be partners with everybody. That's the great thing. If you're open to it, and you don't have to niche to be able to do those partnerships. You've proven that.
Right.
It just helps, because then when you go to someone who does exactly what you do, I didn't feel like I was talking to the enemy. It was more of like, we're in the bunker together. We both do this thing. Let's help each other out.
Did you ever get to a point with when you went niche, like, did you ever have any downtimes with it, or times where you were low on clients and you ever second guessed yourself? And if you did, how did you get through that? Because I imagine if somebody, just like any big decision, there's usually, ebbs and flows, highs and lows. Did you experience any of that, or did you just find that it actually just built, on itself over and over as you went niche?
It's a little unfair. I have a little unfair advantage because I'm a marketer. So I have 20 years of marketing experience. So
I was going to say, you did start in a good time to go niche because you were established. You weren't, just
right. And then before that, I had 15 years of building $1 million business online. So I kind of knew, advertising, partnerships, content marketing, lead generation, referrals. That's what I teach my clients. And that's one of the, not to go down another rabbit hole, but one of the reasons I not only specialize in what I do as far as what we build, but we have an entire education platform of how to succeed as a coach online. So that's another thing. What you can do is you niche, you can become such an expert in that space that you can serve those people in so many other ways.
Gotcha.
So for me, I know marketing, and so it was easy for me. But yeah, a website designer, I can see where that happens, where the net is smaller. But what that means is you have to then use the niche as your competitive advantage to market. So you have to get out there and be proactive in marketing, like what you were just talking about. If there's ever a lull, reach out to more people, more partnerships. Reach out to your old clients and let them know you have a referral program where you can offer a commission.
Nice.
Put the content out there, advertise, do webinars. So niching helps you make your marketing more powerful because you know which audience you have to go to. So if I ever had a lull with coaches, I know exactly where to go with coaches, what to say to coaches. A general website designer trying to market to a coach would say, I can make you a great website. Because I'm a niche, I can say, I can make you a specialized, tailor-made coaching website that gets you booked calls, that gets you more clients within 60 days. Just night and day. Because of the niche, my marketing's more powerful. I know where to bring my marketing. So if there are lulls, it's easier to get out of them because everything, I think, gets easier when you niche. You know what to say, where to say it, and who to say it to.
That's good. I'm glad you said that, man. That's a valuable point. You probably have more confidence because you know exactly, like, if if you're in a slump as a web designer and there's a slow period, which does happen often. I mean, it's why I'm a big proponent of recurring income through maintenance plans and basic SEO and some other areas. But if you have that lull, it can be a little harder if you've never worked with a dentist before, keeping on the dentist train, you might not know the industry. So it's a little tougher to sell, particularly if, they're looking at your portfolio and they're like, well, have you worked with a dentist before? That could be a little trickier on that front. So that makes sense that going niche gives you a little more leverage because you know exactly.
Absolutely.
You know what you're doing.
I even made a note of confidence on my little notes here, which I didn't cover because when you said that, that's really the difference. That's the biggest difference, I think, in the end. When I first started, I was so nervous with sales calls. My voice was jittery. I hated them. I tried to get out of them. That was my biggest pitfall. Was like I was afraid to get on the call and sell. When I targeted coaches, I knew that industry inside out. I did my homework. I read all the books. I took all the courses. I knew what coaches needed. I knew how to deliver the website that worked so well. I loved them. It was like I just flipped a switch. When I picked coaches, my confidence skyrocketed because I knew so much more than the person getting on the phone. And not in a bad way, not like I know more than, but I knew my stuff. And that's, for me, the greatest power of the niche, because when you narrow down that focus, you become so good at this one nugget, you will be like 10,000 times more active and excited to go out there and market it because you know your stuff. Pre-niching, I was scared to do webinars. I was scared to do podcast interviews. I was scared to do sales calls because I was so nervous because I thought, I don't know everything about web design. What if they ask me about A, B, or C? I'm going to look so dumb in front of all these people. When I niched, it was like, I'm a superhero. I know this specific thing so well, anyone can ask me anything. And that transformed my business. My confidence went through the roof. I reached out to people. I did webinars. I did interviews. I did sales calls, all because I chose a niche that I knew. And so that changed everything for me.
Yeah.
I went from an amateur to a pro once I flipped the switch of the niche.
And it's interesting. Yeah, I could definitely see that, to where, particularly if you know that industry very well, you probably anticipate their needs and you can probably guide them through.
I know the questions before.
Yeah, you know the questions. Yeah. Whereas, I mean, most small businesses have the same questions for web design, at least, to where like they want to know, how do they get better rankings? What sucks on their design? So I learned to feel more confident in that regard. But if they ever asked me a question that I didn't know about, I was the king at saying, you know what? I'm not sure, but I'll find out. And I always followed through. I always found out. And like the day later, I'd say like, hey, I did some research on this and here's what I think we could do for this. And it made me look awesome. So just as a side tip, if you do get in that situation where you don't know, you don't have to freak out. Just be upfront. Just like, you know what? I'm not sure about that, but I'll look into it. Like that's something where I might have a partner. I have an expert who I'll talk to. I'll consult with on this.
Right.
And that'll help with confidence.
I'm gonna use your dentist example because now I'm getting all excited about this. So, okay, let's take not you, because I would never want to take business away from you. But if we did a clone of Josh, I would beat you with that dentist, because here's what I do. If I pick dentists, I would study that target market. I would know the greatest pains of people going to a dentist. I would know, the age groups, what kind of dental work people need at different stages. So when do kids need braces? When do you need crowns? What are the price points in the dental industry that people are worried about? How does insurance work? Then when you put us next to each other, I would say there are many people who build websites. Some even build them for dentists, but I am a specialist in your industry. I'm going to build a website that converts because I know the top 3 fears of people who go to a dentist and why they don't go to a dentist.
Yeah.
I'm going to create a lead generator for you that overcomes those fears to help you get more clients. That's the story I tell coaches. I speak their language. No one else knows what I know is like about coaches. So there is no comparison anymore. And so when you say I serve small businesses and a lot of their needs are the same, that's very true. But if you niched, then you could blow the other people out of the water because they're going to talk about website design. But what that client, they don't care about website design. They want clients. They want money. They want results. And so that's where I can beat everybody because I can say, I know exactly what you want. I know your market. I know how to deliver it. We don't do dentists and dog walkers. We do certified coaches who do exactly what you do, and we deliver exactly what you need. That's like your competitive advantage of how you can use a niche. I can go in front of 10 website designers, and if it's for a coach, I'll beat them every time because of those things. Because if you're a generalist, you don't have time to study the pain points of dentists because you'd have to do that across 1,000 industries. When you become a specialist, you have all the time you need to dive deep into one thing and understand it so much better.
Yeah.
So you're taking yourself out of the web design world almost, and you're becoming this business strategist who delivers a website, but also that website's going to do so much more than what the typical designer does for you. So by niching, you can focus in and create tailor-made solutions and bring information to that client that no one else can bring. Whereas as a generalist, there's just no time. You can't study dog walkers and dentists and doctors and handymen. There's just no time. So you have to be general in what you offer. You have to be general in the language you use, the story you tell. But when you niche, everything changes. So I get, and you're great. See, part of the problem is that you're just great. Like you're a great entrepreneur. You're good. You're smart. You're sharp. So that's one of the reasons you've succeeded as a generalist. I think it is harder if people don't have your natural abilities or the abilities you've gained over time.
That's very well said. That's fair, man. Yeah, that is definitely, I mean, I learned to capitalize on my strengths as a generalist and the type of businesses, even if they weren't in the same industry. But there were those other areas where I think having the network that I grew and that I built, that was a big key for me too, because as soon as I became well connected and I had all these people in my back pocket, even outside of web design, even realtors and insurance agents and people in my networking group, that just made me look more reliable and trustworthy. So
Connected.
That is definitely, it makes sense that, I definitely see how you're going to beat out any generalist in that niche. So that's probably one of the biggest top takeaways for me so far.
Because you're not selling the same thing anymore. When I do my sales calls, I don't talk about speed. I don't talk about SEO optimization. I don't talk about anything that most designers would talk about. What I talk about are the worries and fears of a coach, how they can gain the confidence to close a sales call, how we can get more people to book calls with you. Like I talk about a different universe. And so it's apples and oranges then when they talk to me, because I'm talking about things that really concern them, as opposed to someone who's just but someone who just knows the generalist world of design. They're going to focus more on design, which people don't buy websites. They buy results. My clients just want clients. That's what they're after. And the website's the tool that does it. And so when you're a generalist, you're selling websites. When you're a specialist, you're selling results. Big picture, of course, someone like you or people who are good at generalist design, you're going to sell great results too, of course. But if you're just getting started, it is harder because as a generalist, that's what you're going to focus on. I'm going to talk all about websites instead of I just talk all about the result that they can't wait to get.
Question for you. Do you recommend, obviously we know by now you're a big proponent of going niche, for somebody who's early in their career, there's a little more risk like we talked about, but would you still recommend going niche pretty early on as like right when you get going, once you find that niche? Or would you recommend testing the waters with a few different industries, getting more established, building a network, and then going niche?
Personally, I would say niche first, because as long as you take those steps we talked about, inventory, market, ability, because then you're going to choose profitable markets. But I think you're going to have an easier time. It's almost like, do you want to start right or do you want to start fast? And if you just want to get going, like I design websites, you could go that route. But if it were me, if I started over and I couldn't do coaching, I would go through my little strategy of finding a market, and then I would just dive into that market. And you don't need to know that much more. For instance, coaching. The fact that I know that strategy calls are the key to a website, even that is something that most coaches, they don't think about. So if you're going to choose a niche, it doesn't mean you have to spend years deep diving into understanding them. You just have to know them better than the average website designer. And then you're going to stand out. So for instance, dentists, right? That's what I would do is I would go to dentists and I'd find out what their number one struggles are. What are your worries? What keeps you up at night? What are your goals? What kind of business do you want to grow? That right there, after talking to 10 dentists, I could pitch a dental website better than a generalist.
Yeah.
So I don't think it has to take that long, but I just think everything's so much easier when you niche that it's worth it. And the other thing I'll say is it's for a season. People think that it's permanent. I can only work with this person for the rest of my life. But what I teach is, no, this is just for one stage of your career. You can take this and change niches. You can use all these lessons and transition. You're not stuck. You're not trapped. You don't have to do it forever. But you should start there.
Yeah, one question and idea I wanted to throw out there to you was, would you recommend or do you think it's feasible to manage having a generalist type of web design business, for example, but then also, if you're really passionate about one subject, you know a lot about it, maybe it's a decent market, what if you niched on that as almost like a whole different side business, like a side hustle that's niched to this? That way, if it's for, I don't know, like dog training or something like that. If you just know a lot about that, you want to niche to that, but you're afraid, like, am I going to be able to make it a living with this? But I've got this dentist website over here I could do for $5,000. Do I want to pass that up? What are your thoughts on maybe like having a side hustle niche business that's maybe a different brand or something that you could segue to? What are your thoughts on that? Because I'll be honest, I've actually talked to some of my students about that because they want to serve this market, but they're like, I also, like, if a big company wants to spend $10,000 with me, I don't want to pass that up right now when I'm early on. What are your thoughts on that? You can fight with me on that, Jason. We're cool, man. If you disagree, just throw it out there. I'll take it. I'm all right.
So what I would say first is when you niche, you can charge more because you're offering a specialized solution. So the people who get incredible amounts, coaches, consultants, service providers who make 10x what most people make, it's because they have a tailor-made, proven framework. So you can charge more than the average designer if you niche. I'll say that. So you don't need as many people as you think you do if you can niche, because you can charge a premium. But what I would say, I'm a huge proponent of just sticking your flag in the ground and saying, this is what I do, and going all in. Because I think if you've got two, then each one gets 50% of your attention. And so someone who's going 100% on the niche, they're going to beat you. And so personally, but I get it. My first business was motivation for all people ages 0 to 90 who could read. Like, I get it. I went as general as you could go, and it worked. It was just a different business. Everything was so general. My pitches were, do you want to be happy? It's a different business. Now I love that I'm like this scientist who I can pinpoint things. So it does work both ways. But to answer your question, I would say, no, I believe in going all in, at least in this season of your business, going all in and being a true expert. Because you can do it. If you make sure that there's a market and you do your work, you can make it work. You can win. You just got to be smart about what you pick. You want to make sure that they can afford you, they're paying for it. But I really believe in that. And you're still going to get people. I still get people who want us to build websites but aren't coaches. I say no to them. But if I was in the shoes of someone you talked about, they could say yes. That's the other thing. People, even coaches worry because I want them to specialize. If I only work with this certain person doing this certain thing, I'm going to cut everyone else out. And what they realize is, no, people still come to you for other things. So I would say go all in. I just like the idea of expertise.
I like that. I like that, man. It makes a lot of sense. And I'm with you. Like it's something where,
right. See, that's the
again,
thing. Like you're more niche than I am, even though you're the
well, that's
proponent
what's
of the
so
generalist.
funny.
Like,
Yeah, like I'm talking to you and I'm conflicted with myself because as a web designer, I was a generalist, but as a course creator and a coach, I'm completely niche. Like I'm
yep.
super niche, like we've talked about. So everything we've talked about, I did, and because I think for me, because I was able to build a 6-figure course business within 1 year, it's because of going niche. It's because I was a web designer. I understood the challenges. I understood the pain points. I knew the market. I knew exactly what I had been through, and I was able to basically do everything we've talked about at this point and package it up. And there's a lot of people who have told me, I looked at a lot of different web design programs, and I liked you because I use a lot of the same tools, and I like that you already have a community and I'm already plugged in, and you know, like there was a lot of things that I've been through that just work a lot better than an average person who's going to teach them how to build, you know, who knows what kind of website. They could be teaching a Wix website
right.
or something. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I definitely, I
And
see
I'm
the
guessing,
power. Yeah.
I'm guessing that to build the web design business took a lot longer to get to a certain financial figure than it did with courses once you chose a niche. I'm guessing that
It took me 5 years to get to 6 figures. Yeah.
Yeah.
However, my first business card had drum lessons on it, along with web design and graphic design. So
That's awesome.
I had to mature as a person and as a business owner, and I was also doing side jobs. So I don't want to say it's going to take you 5 years to grow a web design agency to 6 figures, because I have students doing that in a year now. But just to say, it does. The reason it took longer is because I didn't have what I've learned, and that's the biggie there.
That is true.
And if you learn a lot in a niche, that's even more power. And I was just thinking, one final thought on, if you decide to go niche, you go for it, but then somebody comes to you with this other option, it's going to be tempting. But what I would say, and I'm sure you probably echo this, Jason, is have a good referral partner for that job. So if you're Sally and you do dog grooming websites or whatever it is, I don't know if that's a good market, but as long as it's a decent market, then if that dentist comes along, we'll just keep on using that example. Yeah. Say, look, I'd love to do this, but that's not my focus. But Jim over here does. He does great websites. Talk to him. And then guess what happens? When Jim gets a dog grooming business, he'll likely refer that to you, and you can capitalize on that. So absolutely, I imagine that's a good way to go.
Yep. And when you do what I'm sure you teach, because there is an issue out there of, here is how much I am charging, which means this job is equal to another job worth the same price. And that could not be it's one of the biggest myths in the world, right? Because if you're a specialist, you have systems designed, you get the work done faster. So per hour, you're making more. If you take an outside job and the $10,000 sounds amazing, but you're going to have to do so much custom work, you're going to have to invest twice the time into it. That job is not profitable like you think it is. So that's the other thing to keep in mind, that when you niche, you can standardize and specialize your systems, which we do. We can build websites in hours as opposed to 6 months. But if someone comes in with a lot of money and it's enticing, but it's outside of our field of expertise, we might think, oh, we're going to get all this money. But if we broke it down, the back and forth with the client, all of the customizations, it's better to have what you have, partners.
Yeah,
we don't do it, but here's someone who does.
I've talked about that before, where it's better to get 5 $3,000 websites of bread and butter type of clients that the system, the process, these brochure style websites, how to build them and integrate them and everything. Whereas a bid for a $15,000 website might sound really interesting, but who knows what that's going to come with.
Absolutely.
That's a prime example. I would rather do the 3,000 bread and butter than a 15,000 that's going to take 6 months and it's going to be a nightmare if that's the case.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. People are like that price tag. Like, I think they're distracted by that. They just look at that, but actually you got to break it down to know how much time you're spending to actually build these things.
And also, I suppose if you're in a niche, you probably get used to some of the same personality types, right? Like, you might really like the coach. Yeah. Like I was joking about lawyers earlier, and the reason that I didn't care for working with lawyers is they just made things so damn difficult, which they're a lawyer. They're going to read every single word in your contract and they're going to do everything. And they're going to, like, when they send content, it's just going to be the most painstaking process for them. Whereas if you're working with a home inspector, they're probably not going to send you content because they don't barely know how to turn their computer on, and they're not using, they're not like, so
that's such a good point.
As a generalist, the danger of that, which we all experience as web designers, is you're going to have different personality types within these different industries. So I suppose if you go niche, you might keen on a certain type of personality type that you really like working with. Yep. And that's a good, like, I really ended up liking working with a couple different types of industries, I guess. There was a steel company and a manufacturing company and a fabrication company, 3 different companies I worked with, and they were all great because they were all established businesses and they knew a little bit about files and stuff like that. And they were really on it with content. Like, those were good established business owner type of people that were really good to work with. Whereas, again, home inspectors, I had some good ones, some tricky ones to work with. Lawyers, realtors, shocker, auctioneers, shocker, were very cheap, so they were a pain to work with. Realtors, I have an amazing realtor who's my personal realtor who we did their website. She was amazing, but realtors tended to be a bit of a pain. So there was like different types of people where I kind of semi-niched as a generalist to where I generally didn't take on lawyers, auctioneers, or realtors. And I'm sorry for any of my old clients.
Yeah, right.
That's you. Maybe that's not you, but that's the way it was. It was, there was just a personality type that gravitated to those industries, and I just didn't want to work with them.
Right. And that's why with those steps we talked about, inventory, marketability, ability, and then passion, that's still important. Who do you like to work with? Because you'll go crazy. You and I both know making all the money in the world does not matter if you have terrible clients. They ruin your life. But
it's not worth it. That 15K isn't worth it.
It's
going to be a nightmare.
Worth it. Yeah. Nope. And you're so right, because once we chose coaches, now my sales calls are so much fun because I know what's in their head. I know what they're worried about. I know what they're expecting to hear. I know what surprises them. I know which part of my sales call is going to get a laugh. I know, like, I have that market dialed in so well that I know every keyword to say, when to say it. I close 89% of my sales calls, which normally for a web designer or generalist, it's a lot lower because you don't know that. It's almost like every conversation is this brand new. I have no idea what I'm getting into. For me, I know these people so well and I've done it so long that it's a joyride. I just know I take them on a journey from start to finish and then close. And it's fun. And it's so much more fulfilling to really know these people. Like you said, you get to pick. I picked these people and I understand them. I know where they're coming from. I know them on a deeper level. So it's not a sales call.
Yeah.
It's a real conversation about trying to help them, which just makes my job so much easier.
Well, and you're a conversions guy. Actually, the first episode I had you on, just as a reminder for everyone, if you haven't listened to the first episode with Jason, go back. It's episode 36. So joshhall.co/036, because we talked about conversions and you gave some absolute gold in that one. But I imagine it's 10 times more powerful if it's within that niche, because there's all those levels that we talked about that's going to make it tough. So, well, man, Jason, this has been great, dude. I was just thinking, like, I think we've covered really most of my main questions as far as, when the time is right to go niche, how to pick that market. Can you recap your four big points again? I know you've touched on it a couple times, but it was.
Yeah. So that first one is why, right? Why niche? And the reason are because you're eliminating alternatives. You're becoming a market of one. You can charge more. You have a specialized service. Your confidence goes through the roof. The next is then how to choose. And so you start by, you take inventory of everything you could do, and then you narrow it by, is there a paying market? Am I good at this? Do I have an ability to actually serve better than most? I don't want you to be average, so you got to be really good at it. And then passion. Do you want to serve that? So you start with inventory and you just cross off whoever doesn't fit. And in the end, you're going to have a strong market that you love to work with. After you have your market, then you research, which we didn't touch on too much, but when it comes to researching, once you know that niche, you go to the social media groups, you read the comments, you find out what their pain points are. You can Google and see what the key terms are that people are searching for in your niche. You can go to Amazon and search for the best-selling books and then read the table of contents. So that's one of my favorite parts.
That's a Pat Flynn trick right there, man.
Right? Yeah, because you can, best-selling books, you know that market's buying it. Table of contents will tell you what they're worried about. So that's how you can really, and go to your clients if they fit in that niche. That's the best thing you could do is talk to people. So talk to your clients. Why were they afraid? Why were they looking for you? Why did they say yes? And then marketing. And the great thing is, once you know that market, as far as word of market, you go to the leaders of the market, you go to the social media groups, you go to the podcasts, to the vlogs, because once you have a niche, you can pinpoint where those people live. If you're a generalist, it is harder to know where your market is congregating. But when you choose a niche, I know all the podcasts, vlogs, blogs, social media groups for coaches. I've got lists, hundreds of them. I know exactly where to market. So that job's almost done for me. I know where to go. I know what to say. So those are the 4 steps: why you should niche, how to choose, how to research, and then how to market to them once you got it.
Yeah, man, that's beautiful. There it is. I'm sold. I'm sold on niching, man. Well done. I'm really excited to hear how this one helps my audience, particularly for those who are thinking about this. I hope this really encourages everybody and gives them the confidence to niche down and to specialize and to, I hate to use the whole 10X thing, but it's true. You can, unintentionally, I niched with what I do right now, and I didn't even think about it. I just did it, and it definitely paid off immediately. So, man, Jason, this has been awesome. I want to ask you one final question, but I want to know, where would you like my audience to go if they want to find out more about you?
SavvyHippo.com. So SavvyHippo.com. So yeah, they can go there. If they want to reach out with questions, they can just click our contact link and they can reach me directly if they have any questions about anything. Happy to help anyone in your audience.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll make sure that's all linked in the show notes. And my final question for you as we wrap this up. So you're a marketing guy, you're a business guy, an entrepreneur. You've had your finger on the pulse in a lot of different industries. If somebody was just early in their web design career and they were thinking about niching and they were interested, I know we talked about the steps, but is there a particular industry that you think is going to be worthwhile pursuing in 2021? Is there an industry that you feel that you think is exploding or is going to boom? And what would that industry be that maybe web designers could target?
My answer would be coaching and consulting, unfortunately, because I don't want any competition. So you guys stay away. But yeah, with what happened with COVID, so many people, their lives are online now, and they're realizing that you can't rely on the job market like you used to. So many people realize they've got to depend on themselves. And so the service-based business where you can run your company online, so selling information and selling your expertise, it was big before. I think it's exploding now. But there are a lot, it's not just coaches and consultants, right? There's a lot, there's tutors, there's therapists, there's healers, there's business consultants. So there's a lot of different people selling their expertise that you could target. But as far as coaches, I would say stay away from that market. It's terrible. You don't want to deal with coaches. You just,
Fair enough.
But yeah, I think the expertise market, it's always been big, right? You and I have heard about selling your expertise forever, but I think 2021, it's going to explode even bigger. But I also think there's a lot of others, when you think about it, what's going to come back? So restaurants are going to come back like crazy, travel, everything that people are building up this anticipation for. Once it's safe, all of these industries are going to explode. I think there's tons of opportunity everywhere else too, brick and mortar. And so if you were brand new, what I would do is think about that industry that is going to have a huge uptick, and then specialize on delivering maybe a post-COVID service where you can say, I know where you were. I know the struggles you were going through. What is the fastest way to get you back where you were and beyond? That's one way you could niche and you specialize using COVID. We're going to go post-COVID. The world's different. You need different tools. Luckily, you've got me. I'm going to help you set all those tools up. I'm going to tell you exactly how to use them so you can 10X that business now that the world's coming back online.
There it is, everybody. Take what Jason said, just plop your name in there and your service, and then there's your sales script. That was beautiful. Jason, thanks again for your time, man. Loved having you on the podcast again, and I don't think this will be the last time either.
Oh, thank you so much. I love talking with you about anything. So anytime you want me back, I'm there.
On it, man. Cheers. Thanks, Jason. Hey guys and gals, just wanted to pop in with a couple things before you head out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. I would love to hear your feedback, and it will also help other web designers find the show. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode. Just go to joshhall.co, click on podcasts, and search this episode number, and you'll find all the links, descriptions, and resources we talked about. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, and you'll be notified when the next episode is live. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode.